A huge welcome to all our empowered creatives. I'm Rain, part of the filmmaking planner community, and in honour of spooky season, I thought it only fitting to invite filmmaker Saoirse Selway over for a conversation about creating within the horror genre.
Thank you.
Welcome, Saoirse. Would you like to introduce yourself and talk about a bit about your journey as a filmmaker?
Yeah, sure. My name is Saoirse Selway, and I am a short filmmaker, mainly working in genre, in horror and sort of things like this. And I think I like to try and push the boundaries of what sort of short form storytelling looks like in a narrative sense. So even though like it's an horror, I think anyone who knows my work would think it's still like kind of unconventional. But I think that's what's interesting about making films.
I definitely get that from your work. It's the unconventional side that kind of draws you in, I guess, as well, and also draws in your audience, I think. What is it about the horror genre that captured your interest, and do you remember how you first got into it?
Yeah, well, I've always like loved horror as a fan, like first and foremost. I think that's something like any horror fan can really relate to. I think it's like even if like you have more like avant-garde sensibilities as a storyteller, like if you're not a fan of horror, then I don't think you're gonna like understand what to do with horror, I think, or like what people want from it. I remember like from a really young age, like God bless my dad, he would show me things that definitely were beyond maybe what was age appropriate. Like the first time he showed me The Exorcist, I was very young to be watching a film with I think like The Exorcist has passed so much into like popular culture that like we forget some of the things that actually happen on screen in that film. Like they've turned into images instead of like actions with consequences, you know? But like you see that for the first time without any of that cultural baggage. It's like it's a lot to take on. He showed me The Omen when I was really young. He showed me and also like we really like more avant-garde horror as well. I remember maybe not avant-garde, but like stuff that is a little bit like bringing in other genres and textures. Like we watched Pan's Labyrinth at a very young age. We watched Let the Right One In at a very young age, and both of these I think are very like formative films. What I like to do. We watched this fantastic little sort of British horror film called Kill List when I was very young. That has been a big influence on what I like to do because that's a film that sort of starts off as a sort of film that you're like, okay, I know what I'm getting into. I think I know what I'm about to watch, and then slowly, like the sort of genre things that rest on are sort of it's like a table, and you slowly take the legs away until it all falls out from under you. Um, which is something that in some of my work I like to play with. Definitely, I think. But yeah, like I loved it first and foremost as a fan, definitely, and then I think like horror fans have a most horror fans, I think, have an interesting relationship with horror as a genre. Like, I think horror sometimes has a little bit of a victim complex about itself, you know, or a little bit of an inferiority complex about itself, you know. I think that my experience is growing up, I often found myself having to defend my taste in movies to people with maybe more like serious artistic ambitions. Um, and I I think that that sort of does two things. Like one, it means you're almost sort of like subconsciously motivated to find the artistic value in horror and like try and make it a more sort of mature or approachable or presentable genre. Whereas I think like part of the joy of horror is that it can do all of that stuff while still like being ultimately like about the joys of seeing like someone's intestines mold out or something of this nature, you know?
I have always found that horror is a bit of a Marmite genre, I think, because it's not as
Mm,
widely popular as, say, like action movies where everybody watches them all the time. But it is
yeah.
where we get so many cult classics from, and so many things that are
Yes.
so specifically famous. So that's why,
Yes.
as you said, there's a bit of a victim complex about it. I do think that there are lots of preconceptions and judgments about the horror genre. Do you find that as a filmmaker as well as a fan?
Well, like it's interesting. We recently took our short film Rot to Mansfield Town Film Festival, which was, by the way, just going to take a little sidebar to say the Mansfield Town Film Festival rocks. I've been to a lot of very small short film festivals, and not all of them. Like it can be easy, I think, for it to be a very dispassionate, dispersonal event. Like you sort of turn up, you watch a bunch of short films, you got home, and I think what they're doing in Mansfield is trying to cultivate a really excellent sort of family feel with all the filmmakers there.
I did
Um,
follow that on social media, and I think you definitely got that vibe as well through like everything that they were posting, because it was very personal and it was about
mm.
the individual filmmakers that were there instead of watch this film, okay, move on to the next one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it's a really, really excellent time, and props to the lads for putting it on. We also took it to a bunch of other festivals, and what I find is like it really like sticks out as a horror short. I think like in a roster, like we were very lucky in Mansfield to be part of a strand that focused on sort of genre storytelling. But I think like horror short films stand out on festival billings because festivals, I think, there's a type of festival movie, there is, and I think this is sort of synecdoche for the broader sort of inferiority complex horror sometimes has. I think, like, let's use as an example the conversation around whether Toni Collette should have been nominated for an Oscar for Hereditary back in the day, because she is like that is a powerhouse performance. Ari Aster, whatever you think about his movies, he is excellent at getting committed performances out of his actors. I think he really understands how to make actors feel comfortable doing sort of things in performance that they might not feel as appropriate in other films.
Mm.
Um, and I think I would have been very happy to see Toni Collette get an Oscar, but I think the conversation around it was very much framed as horror doesn't get Oscar nominations. This film could break that, instead of like, is this just like a good performance on its own terms?
Just so often seen as like the other. I think quite a
Yeah,
lot of it's like
totally.
horror is its own category. Oh, it's yeah, it's just horror. But when I was like actually getting into horror, because I wasn't when I was younger, because I definitely was one of those people who had
Mm,
those like preconceptions and judgments about it. But when I actually started
mm,
looking into it, I found a bunch of the like subgenres of
mm.
horror that I really liked. Like comedy horror is a thing that I really got into,
Yeah, yeah,
mostly
yeah.
because of Matthew Gray Gubler. But yeah, so it's for people looking on the outside, it's quite othered. But then, I guess for fans of it, that's where you kind of get those cult classics come in, because there's so much depth and because it's quite
Mm.
unseen by the
I
rest of the
think,
world, then you can really dive into it, can't you?
yeah, totally. I think for average Joe on the street,
Mm.
like who not even like doesn't watch horror, who doesn't really watch movies,
Yeah,
Like I think for that guy, horror is Friday the 13th Part 5, like they're sort of cheap, and it's about the violence,
yeah,
and it's like I remember the first time I watched Scream, right? Which is the sort of meant to be the sort of horror pastiche movie. Um, and I was really taken aback. It's a good film, like don't get me wrong, but I was really taken aback by how I think like limited the palette of films that were satirizing was.
hmm
It sort of seemed to be taking parts from the same sort of two or three movies, and I think like part of that I think comes from like a generational separation where like at that time that like I think we forget that there's like 10 Friday the 13th movies. There's like something like 12 Halloween films now, something like off the top of my head.
yeah,
So if you want to satirize slasher films, those two or three, four properties are like 70% of the films people see.
yeah,
Whereas I think we live in a slightly different environment now. Whereas I think like if I was to make Scream for superhero films now, I think like you would be pulling from mostly Marvel films because there's like 40 of them,
yeah.
you know. But like, and I think part of the problem with that sort of that being the way that horror is seen by a lot of people is slasher films are great. And I don't want to be someone who's sort of standing up there and saying, like, oh no, like horror can be good. Look at these sort of more like uh these sort of more critical applause courting movies, you know. I don't want to create like a separation and acceptability between a movie like Skinamarink and a film like Friday the 13th Part 4, which has its lovely pleasures, you know.
Is there anything about creating horror films that you've learned that you think could be applied to filmmakers in general?
Yeah, so I think what horror is really good at is I think like is it doing subtext in a way that isn't condescending or like hitting you over the head or
Okay.
anything like this. I think like what like let's if we go back to that sort of idea of like the festival movie, like I
Mhm.
think about what like a festival short film is, or even a festival feature film, and it's like it's it's very directly about an issue, and it's sort of like this is how you're meant to feel about it,
Yeah.
and like this is the story, and occasionally people just like say in the dialogue sort of how you're meant to feel or something like that, right?
They lead you
Um,
on a journey, don't they? And they take you to across like every step of it.
everyone's broadly well-meaning and no one is a really bad person, you know, things of this nature. Um, and like I'm not this is not to say that films like that are bad, but like when you go to a festival, you will see 10 films like that and they'll all be fairly interchangeable in your mind. Um, like I feel like I think about a film like the example I always use is Alien, the 79 film, where like it is talking about a whole bunch of stuff. Like they were very intentionally sort of trying to reframe the experience of sexual assault in a way that sort of men can appreciate, you know?
Yeah.
Um, very intentionally trying to do that. And it's also about capitalism. Like it really sees the intersection of labor exploitation and sort of sexual exploitation and how those can be comorbidities, you know? Um, and like it's about all of this, but you would never know that to watch it, right? And at the end, it's not said this is sort of how you should feel about these issues. It's asked a bunch of questions and then said, and then just left you with them, you
Yeah.
know.
It doesn't take
Um,
you so clearly on that journey of, okay, this is what you feel now and this is what you feel now. You're more left to, there's a lot more
totally.
ambiguity, I feel.
I would also think about a film like Brian De Palma's adaptation of Carrie. I've seen a bunch of readings of that film that are both sort of critical of its gender politics and also very sort of celebratory of them. Carrie is in that point of the story experiencing a time of life where women are very often told how they should be forever, put in a box, things of this nature. Like the film opens with her getting her first period, you know. So it's very much about like the onset of womanhood, and it's about that all these people around Carrie trying to tell her what a woman should be and how she's failing at womanhood in various regards. And what she finds in that instead is sort of like she finds a power that rejects can sort of constraining womanhood, right? And actually finds power in rejecting it. I think what horror does, and that film is, I think, very particular about this, is the film says this is someone that you're scared of, right? You know, like it doesn't say Carrie is evil and bad for rejecting womanhood and sort of killing all of these people. It doesn't say she's a bad person for that. It doesn't necessarily say she's a good person. What horror
Mm.
does is it says, "Oh, you're scared of this, aren't you? Isn't that interesting?" And then it leaves it there.
I've definitely found that with your work as well. Um, that there's a lot of very complex characters, and you don't know
Mm,
whether they're bad characters or good characters. And the whole time
yeah.
that I'm like watching your film Rock or reading the
Mm.
Cephalopod script, which you guys can't watch yet, but I've read it. Um,
It's gonna happen. It's gonna
especially
happen.
with those characters, I'll read like one scene, I'll go, okay, I feel like this is a bad character, and then I read the next scene and I go, oh, maybe they're a good character. There's a lot more room for ambiguity and like very complex characters, I feel.
One of the things I found when people were reading that script for the first time is they'd come back and they'd say, like, "What is going on with the cephalopod? I don't know how, like, what they're meant to be, like, how you're meant to feel about
Yeah.
that sort of
I feel like I've
entity." And I'm
definitely
like,
asked you that as well. I was like, the end I
"Yeah, yeah,
felt
yeah.
so like leaves you with that unsettled feeling, which I guess is like such a hallmark of the horror genre as well.
Yeah, no, totally." I think, like, but, like, you're not the only person to have that sort of reaction to the script, and I think, like, I've had other people have that reaction in a way that's like, "I feel like you need to clarify this," but I'm like, if you have that feeling walking away from the script, then I feel like I've done my job as a storyteller, you know? Like, I've introduced a topic with sort of, that raises a lot of questions about how you're meant to feel about a character, and then, like, I sort of want th in a way, like, the art is asking you to figure out your own relationship to it. Like, I think a lot about, modern art specifically, like some of
Mm.
the sort of surrealist or Dadaist stuff. Like, I really like the experience of being left to figure that out, you know?
I think that's a really good analogy for film as well, because there's always something that the writer intends, but
Yeah.
it's left open to so much interpretation for the viewer. So I think that's yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense as an analogy for film and can help people
Mm.
maybe understand the horror genre more. That you're not supposed
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
have all the answers.
Yeah, totally. I had this conversation with someone the other day about, playing music, or I think, like, the thing that always gives away to me someone who is unsure of themselves on stage is when before every song, they spend like 3 or 4 minutes explaining what the song means, you know? And I think, like, have the confidence that the material if you're confident in your own material, let it stand, you know?
Mm.
Let it stand as a piece that is sort of strong enough that you don't need to support it with your words.
And be okay with that ambiguity and that okay that people are going to interpret it in different ways. And that doesn't
Mm.
mean that some interpretations are wrong.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I think, like, to talk about a film that I just made, Rot, that is sort of having its festival moment now, I think, we really intentionally, I think, stripped away words. Like, there's very few words in that film, I think, and I really wanted to make a film that is an emotional experience first and foremost. It is like something you experience as, a sensory experience. It is something you experience as a tonal sort of energy first and foremost, and then it's like before you know it, the film's over, um, and then you have to process, like, what the hell did I just watch? You know, like, I on set, I was saying all the time, I want it to feel like an assault movie, you know, like a movie that assaults the audience. And what I like about that is it's like, I feel this way about some like very fast, very transcendent metal songs. It's like
Mm.
you're so like in it, and then it's over, and you didn't realize it was ending, but it's done now, and you sort of have to catch your breath a little bit, you know.
I definitely got that like watching it because of it's such a sensory short film, I think, just especially because of
Mm,
the sound design in it as well.
yeah.
Is
Yeah, the
like a
sound sounds really
huge
great. I
part.
need to
Yeah.
shout out Ryan, who did the sound design on Rot, and brought in some of the music cues as well. I think he did a really excellent job and
Mm.
really like listened to what we were saying as well. He was a really great collaborator. For anyone who hasn't seen Rot, it's about a guy living in sort of a level of sort of destitution. Um, there's an implication that it's sort of somewhat self-inflicted by his mental health state, but at the same time, we wanted to imply that, at least on the fringes, that although he is obviously a guy who's not doing well mentally, he's not getting the support really needed to sort of improve that in a way that he could then improve his own life and his own situation. Um, and I think we wanted to capture the sort of sounds of everyone around him that like intrude into his life. Like living in London is a very noisy place,
Mm.
And I think we wanted for this character for it to feel like every noise was another thing that chips away at his mental health. You know, like a car passes, a dog barks, and it's like, oh god, not another interruption. You know,
Mm.
um, so we wanted the sound design to feel extremely like intense, like it's sort of not like it's holding him like some sound designs do. You know, it holds you. We wanted it to feel like as an audience member, like you almost want to turn it off. You know,
Quite
like that's
overwhelming.
yeah. So that you're sort of put in that emotional position that he's in. You know.
Did having such like a focus on the sound design for Rot, do you think that will come through in future projects? Is that something that you think you would
Mm.
apply to all genres as a filmmaker, or do you think that's something that should basically stick to the horror genre?
I think that what I really learnt making Rot is as a director, you control everything that the
Mm.
audience experiences. You know, like I think maybe what people who haven't made films don't realize is how many choices you are forced to make.
Yeah,
Like it's not just camera position. It's like you have to like we thought incredibly deeply, me and my collaborators, about what vest and what trousers the guy should be wearing, and it's just like a white beater vest and sort of yoga pants, basically. Um, and we thought for ages about these choices, and it's something that I think audiences might not realize.
watching something, people don't always realize it straight away, but subconsciously it all adds, doesn't it? Every choice that you make will
Yeah.
subconsciously add to that experience.
Situations will put these choices in front of you, and then you have to make those decisions. You are forced to make these choices, but a good filmmaker will, at every opportunity, um, sit and actually have a good answer for all of these questions that is long and detailed. When it comes to sound design, like a lot of movies just want to do like naturalism. You know, we live
Mhm.
in the age of verisimilitude in filmmaking. I think it's slightly starting to degrade now. You're seeing voices break through that are less interested in just sort of reproducing reality. At the same time, these realities also exist because of industrial pressures. Filmmakers today, if you want to make films, it's a lot easier within the studio system to make a film that just sort of mimics reality. If you're a studio, it's a lot easier to hedge your bets on what something looks like, to say, I want these different options than to commit to an aesthetic and then live and die by that for the whole journey of making a movie. You know, like for me as an artist, the choosing the aesthetic and the living and dying by it is the job. That's the
Yeah.
process, you know.
And
But
that's something
studios
that you
don't.
love about it and that I know.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I think like film is such a textural experience that
Mm.
I I think like you have to really when you start making a movie, think about what your film would be like to feel if it was a fabric, and then live and die by that. I think, but studios don't think in that way, which is why we live in the era of verisimilitudinousness. You know, um, because it's just if you're a studio, that's just like it immediately gets rid of hundreds and hundreds of anxieties that you would have and risk factors that you would have. Studios are incredibly risk averse because
Yeah.
sort of like we live basically since the explosion of new media, explosion of the internet, explosion of sort of other ways of consuming audiovisual media. Film studios have become incredibly risk averse because they don't really know what works anymore, but they know like what is a risk, basically. So they don't want to commit to something that is a risk, which is why everything looks grey at the minute. But when it comes to sound design, to title back, what this sort of manifests as is nothing is like a choice when it comes to sound design anymore. And to be fair, audiences I think are much more unforgiving of uh, inconsistent or sort of flawed sound design than they are of
Mm.
flawed visual choices. You're taken out of the movie much more by the sound design being off than you are by the visuals being off.
Yeah.
But I also think like the reason I think everyone was so impressed by the Zone of Interest is like it's an artistic choice manifesting through a choice with the sound design, you know, like, and that's something we don't really see. So I think like when you're a filmmaker, like don't just take it as read that your sound design is going to be naturalistic, is going to be like sort of like wallpaper in the background, you know. Think about like, what if my wallpaper was a bold color, you know? Like what what does that open up as an artistic possibility for you? Like, I think don't think about it as like you have to do one thing or the other thing. Think about like what do these choices give you access to doing, right?
And
Like,
consider all of those different choices, because you do have the freedom to do that when you are a small filmmaker.
yeah, exactly. Like with the film that we're making, the Cephalopod, I think because it's all stop motion and it's set in a period setting, you are forced to build a sound design from the ground up anyway.
Yeah.
But I think that's not a limitation. That's not a task. That's not a chore.
Mm.
It's a possibility. It's an opportunity. I
Yeah.
think. Like I think that's what I'm trying to say. Filmmakers outside of the horror genre, or horror has great sound design all over the place anyway, you know. But like filmmakers outside of the horror genre, like don't see sound design as something you've got to do to get the film made. See
Mm.
it as an opportunity to make more choices, is what I would say.
I think that's a brilliant thing for all filmmakers to take away, that even if they feel a bit pressured by making certain choices, acknowledge
Mm.
that you don't have to be limited by those choices, but they can be opportunities. They can be opportunities for you to explore different styles as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah, and to introduce new ways of delivering storytelling and delivering meaning.
exactly, exactly. Well, thank you very much for talking with us today. Is there anywhere that we can support your work or follow your journey?
Yeah, totally. So I think if you want to keep up with what I'm doing artistically, the best way that you can follow my work is by following my Instagram, which is Saoirse_Selway. I've sort of made an intentional choice to get off most other social medias, and I sort of use that to promote my work, basically.
Because you also do music around London as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do. We did a wonderful gig, sorry, at the Syndicum Social in Shepherd's Bush recently, which was a lovely experience. And we're in conversations about doing more, so that's really exciting.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. So you've got more music coming up, more scripts coming up, more editing coming up. So lots of
Yeah, yeah,
opportunities
absolutely.
there as well in the
Yeah,
creative
totally.
world.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for talking to us today.